Well, it's beautiful with spacious skies, has amber waves of green, and has purple mountains majestic that rise up out of the plains. And all across America, from sea to shining sea, where the mountains and the prairies meet, is a place I need to be. Home is where Montana is my home. From mountain peaks to prairie lands, the places I have known. And
Hello, I'm William Marcus. Welcome to the Backroads of Montana, a program that features not only the beauty of our state, but also the interesting people who add the special character to life in Big Sky Country. Today we come to you from the Isaac Walton Inn in Essex. It was built to provide rest and food for the crews on the Great Northern Railroad and is operated today as a full-service inn. The town of Essex was a siding along J.J. Hill's Great Northern Line that ran from St. Paul to Seattle. The stories in this edition of Backroads are all connected in some way by railroading. We'll make a stop on Montana's High Line, a string of towns that grew up along the Great Northern, for a very special outdoor meal. We'll teeter from a ghostly relic of Montana's railroading past that lingers in the Little Belt Mountains. We'll pull into Butte, which is a railroading hub as well as a mining city, for a little reflection on automobile travel. And you'll meet a woman who climbed on a train bound for New York City in 1942 to follow her dream to be a jazz pianist. Our first stop is in Havre, a community that in its early days was a thriving outpost on the Great Northern Line. A number of Havre citizens have volunteered their time and talent to preserve a shadowy path into the town's pioneer days. You can't see all of Havre from here. To gain a true appreciation of this town's history, you must go beneath the streets. And back in time.
So adults are going to kind of have to use your imagination.
By the turn of the century, the railroad had turned Havre into a rip-roaring town. But in 1904, fire devastated the downtown business district. Owners didn't want to wait to rebuild, so they moved their businesses into their basements. A series of passageways connected the different stores and created Havre Beneath the Streets. 5 years ago, Havre native Frank DeRosa and countless community volunteers took on the overwhelming task of recreating this underground world. Frank's home movies show the monstrous cleanup. Over 50 years of inactivity meant sealed passageways and debris piled to the ceilings. Undaunted, the volunteers plowed through the challenge and preserved history.
And what happened is we'd come in, punch a bunch of holes, pile of dirt, and then we'd holler help from the community. The contractors and people come down and help us move that pile of dirt. So then we'd plug along some more and another pile of dirt, holler help, and the community would come down. And yes, we were told, you're crazy for starting it, it'll never happen. Well, we got bullheaded, I guess, decided we're going to make it happen. So in reality, to be honest with you, I don't recall the day I said, Jiminy, I wish we hadn't started this. It didn't even enter our mind because we knew what we were facing when we started.
The next step was to find authentic items for the displays. The volunteer committee held an open house and placed an ad in the newspaper. It contained a wish list of items needed. Again, the community response was overwhelming. 300 donors loaned or donated thousands of items. It was all done for free and gave amazing detail to the displays. There are nearly 1,000 items in the pharmacy alone, including the original bottles and labels kept in storage since 1917. It leaves a lasting impression on those who take the tour.
I thought it was great. I really do. We have a historical museum in Versailles, Missouri near us, and this is so much more interesting because of the stories and the fact that people lived underground.
For Joe and Carol Scott, it was an even bigger surprise. They used to live in Havre, but never knew what was beneath it.
We didn't even know. She graduated from nurses training here too, in Havre, and we didn't know there was such a thing existed in Havre because we'd been here several times. We have friends here, and it was very interesting. A lot of memories. I can relate to a lot of those things in there when I was a kid.
I was there. I graduated in 1951, and I had no idea they had anything underground.
This was a big...
Carol Scott is not alone. The city's past remains a mystery to many. Much of Havre's early history is unwritten. Second-hand stories and word of mouth were the only ways to piece together this underground puzzle.
And most of our information has come from a few of the old-timers would talk to us. Everybody wouldn't talk to us. It's still a mystery, and we try to tell them, hey, this is third generation, but a lot of them still wasn't talking. Like our bar room here now, we had a gentleman come down, he said it had a wooden bar and a glass mirror. We found them down here, so we like to believe they were the originals.
Other originals include the door to the Pioneer Meat Market, the brick oven in the wall of Gurley's Bakery, and the safe door in Shorty Young's office. Christopher Shorty Young was a true character of the times. He was an entrepreneur who took full advantage of men's vices in the early 1900s.
When he first come to Havre, he had to borrow money to get a haircut. In a matter of a few years, he had a lot of the prostitution and the gambling and bars under his belt, but he was a man that was rich one day and broke the next.
Shorty and other colorful characters await you beneath the streets of Havre. And of course, Frank will be there too. Ready to welcome you to a part of northern Montana history.
Good morning. That's the solution. Okay.
Frank reminded us that underground Havre was a team effort. Its success came from the dedication and sacrifice of many members of the community. Underground Havre is open year-round, but tours need to be scheduled in advance. This inn is named for the English conservationist Isaac Walton, author of The Complete Angler and the patron saint of fly fishermen everywhere. As I mentioned, the inn was built 55 years ago to house and feed the railroad crews who worked to keep the tracks open during the tough winter months. The dining car cafe at the inn features replicas of the china that was used in the dining cars of the Empire Builder. Feeding hungry workers is something of a hobby for the man in our next story. He's Lloyd Woolery, a farmer from Inverness, who uses one of the simple tools of his trade to create a delicious entree for his Highline neighbors. When Lloyd Woolery caters a fondue, he always brings this simple recipe for success: a 100-pound tank of propane, a 20-gallon kettle, 100 pounds of steak, 10 gallons of oil, and 2 well-seasoned pitchforks. Guests who attend bring their appetites, because this is a pitchfork fondue, and Lloyd Woolery is the Fondue King.
I just had seen it done, and I thought it was kind of neat, and I liked the steak, so we started doing that. It was experimental, I'll tell you.
Lloyd serves most of Liberty, Hill, and Blaine counties, catering about 3 fondues each year. He generously donates his time, travel, and fuel, only charging for the steak, $3 per plate. Today, Lloyd is in Chinook, feeding 100 members of the Farm Credit Service's Havre office.
Well, you've got to figure a half a pound of meat per person. And the trouble at something like this, a community thing, you never know how many people.
Lloyd believes that the key to good pitchfork fondue begins with the meat. In this case, Montana Black Angus, marinated overnight in Lloyd's most heavily guarded secret.
I don't think very many of them marinate the meat. And I think that's the secret to having a good steak, but that's my taste, I guess, and not compared to anybody else's, but...
The kettle makes a big difference, too. This rustic metal pot has been in service for years. It's so heavy, Lloyd must winch it into place. A few quick connections, an old wheel for support, and... Now it's simply a matter of waiting for the oil to heat up, giving Lloyd time to visit with neighbors and brush up on Highline genealogy.
Just no moisture.
Now, are you related to the Bomas over at Choteau, Fairfield, or Choteau, isn't it?
Choteau, Conrad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my nephew.
Oh,
My
okay.
nephew, he's at Guilford.
Okay.
But
When the thermometer registers 375 degrees, Lloyd slides 12 cuts of meat onto the tines of 2 pitchforks, which were never designed for this sort of duty.
ready?
Instantly, the outside of the beef is seared, locking in the succulent, lightly marinated juices. And in exactly 3 minutes, all 12 steaks have sizzled to perfection. Now the process becomes automatic. Lloyd, aided by his wife Fern, synchronizes the skewering and cooking, preparing one pitchfork while the other cooks in the kettle. During this culinary choreography, timing is critical.
I gotta run.
In less than 30 minutes, it's all over. With paper plate in hand, guests line up at the serving table and wonder, what goes best with Pitchfork Fondue?
What goes best with it? More food.
The hosts oblige by adding potato salad, rolls, and baked beans to round out this belt-busting buffet.
This is excellent. Delicious. Recommended to anybody. This is good old Montana beef, and you've got to do pretty bad stuff to ruin that.
What surprised me most about it was how tender it is. It's really good.
Good.
With stomachs full, most guests continue to visit. Some go for seconds, while restless children head for the playground. Lloyd strolls the sidelines, proudly surveying his gastronomical handiwork, modestly receiving compliments, quietly accepting thanks, waiting for his oil to cool down. When it has, he will filter and reuse it, recycling his oil and the culinary magic that he conjures up each time he slips on the apron of the Fondue King.
We've always been able to get rid of the steaks afterwards. I guess that must be that the steaks taste pretty good.
I should add that Lloyd was nice enough to feed our Backroads crew. They said the steak was delicious. Just 16 miles east of our location at the Isaac Walton Inn is Mariah's Pass, the highest point along the Great Northern Route. Outside the inn, they keep the helper engines running day and night, ready to assist heavy freight trains over the steep grade of the Continental Divide. For the next few minutes, we'll take a different track and travel an abandoned railroad bed that winds its way through the Little Belt Mountains. Our steam engine hisses in this quiet community, once the home of rail workers, farmers, and their families. With pressure built and freight cars coupled, the engine begins to pull, and we head west through tunnels and over trestles. Near this trestle, over a winding creek, we take on grain. In 1913, the trestle's construction crew, halfway through their task, paused briefly for this photograph. Work on the trestle and tunnels was completed in 1916 and proudly served the Chicago-Milwaukee route until the tracks were removed in the 1980s. The old railroad bed now runs through private farms, and for that reason we can't reveal the location. We learned about it from a viewer who wrote to us about a stately old trestle in the middle of nowhere. Many early railroads met the same fate as the Chicago-Milwaukee, their tracks ripped out and their bridges left to rust. But not J.J. Hill's Great Northern Line. He owed much of his early success to the mining and smelting operations in Butte. Next, you'll meet a man whose work reflects the historic setting of the mining city.
It's Bob Corbett, and I'm 48, and I'm from Butte, Montana, the richest hill on earth. There's 694 separate pieces of mirrors. There's about 180 square feet, which means it's about 180 pounds of mirror that has been added to the car. This is a way to sort of artistically reflect the bridge between the world of artists and the world of motorheads or car people by doing a little something with both. The two worlds don't rarely touch, and through this car I think they do. Why is because of something that a musician named Captain Beefheart said in Seattle in 1970. He said, "You only exist for the amusement of your friends." So partly why I did this was to amuse my friends. The other reason is something I've come up with, which is this is not a dress rehearsal for your life. This is it. So if you really want to do something and you've been putting it off for years, really you ought to do it right away, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So this is one of those projects that I'd thought about for quite a while and finally decided, well, I'm going to do it. It was actually my father's Oldsmobile, and I think he may have had the best reaction to it. When I finished it and we took it down to show him what his Oldsmobile looked like, he didn't think for 2 seconds and said, "It's a mirror image of an Oldsmobile I used to own." I thought that was pretty good. That's beautiful. Thank you. It's the shiniest Oldsmobile on earth.
I like your car. Where'd you get it?
I made it. I'm amazed at how many people look right at it and don't even notice that it's different. It's amazing. Maybe it says something about how unaware some people are. Or maybe they just think it's foolishness, which of course it is. Well, it turns out to be actually cheaper than a paint job. There's 180 square feet of mirrors at about $1 a square foot, so there's 180 bucks. And I think there's probably $50 worth of double-sided sticky tape squares, so that's about $230 total. And then 5 tubes of Miro mastic at about $5 a piece, so we're up around $260, $265. And 3 bowler trophies at $1/4 a piece, so it's well under $300 for the whole thing. It takes about a half a bottle of glass cleaner and usually 3 rolls of paper towels. It takes so much, and a lot of elbow grease. The glass edges are not all completely even, so it shreds the paper towels up pretty quickly. You end up with a trail of shredded paper all the way around the top. Butte always has had a history of real characters here, and I'm not saying that I am one or trying to be one, but I think that it's okay to be one here. It's okay to drive something like this around here. I don't know how it would go over in some other places, even in Montana.
You may have noticed the large concrete structure in the background during that story. It once housed an ore crusher that was part of a vast mining complex. A long-gone trestle carried hopper cars to the top of the structure, where they were dumped into the massive bin. Bob has remodeled the bunker into his spacious and very solid home. Our home today, the Isaac Walton Inn, was added to the National List of Historic Places in 1985. It's near the Great Bear Wilderness Area and Glacier National Park, which some people call the crown of the continent. Our next story is about a woman who's a genuine Montana gem. Her effervescent personality and polished professionalism make her the jewel of the Bitterroot Valley. Jean Wrobel has been in love with the piano since she was 5 years old. Her early playing was part imitation and part frustration, with formal lessons that required her to read notes on a page.
Then I decided I wanted to take lessons from a lady who played in a dance band. So I took lessons from her all through high school, and she taught me how to. And then F. That's what I learned. And that's, now what is it that they call stride piano?
Jean was instantly taken by the sound. She sought out live performances by jazz musicians. Lots of big bands were touring the country then, and she'd go to Missoula with her friends.
Oh, we'd all go crazy. And I watched those guys, and I didn't want to do anything else. I just wanted to play the piano.
Her parents sent her to Portland for lessons, but by now she had heard the sound of a jazz pianist who spoke directly to her heart. His name was Teddy Wilson, a member of the Benny Goodman Trio. Jean had heard him on the radio and had many of his records. So in 1942, she climbed on a train for New York City, hoping to meet her hero. Some friends took her to Cafe Society, the jazz club where Wilson was playing.
He came over to our table. We invited him over to our table, and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, I just don't think I have time to give lessons. So we went back again. And then finally, I think it was like the third time we talked to him, and I can still remember he was holding his head. Oh, the poor man. And he said, all right. I said, just listen to me play. And then, if you can't give me lessons, I'm going back to Montana. And he said, Montana? I think my wife came from Anaconda. Well, he gave me lessons.
And soon after, Wrobel had her first professional gig, playing at a club in Paterson, New Jersey for $65 a week. She signed with the William Morris Agency as Jean Hamilton, taking her stage name from her hometown. After paying her dues in Paterson, Jean got better dates in Philadelphia, Detroit, and even at the Onyx Club in New York City, where she shared a dressing room with headliner Billie Holiday. She was now making $200 a week, but she was also playing until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and the fast-paced life began to take its toll. She ended up ill and returned home to Hamilton to recuperate. When she returned to New York, a friend suggested she try out for a movie role. The musicians were going to be selected through a radio contest. The broadcasts were heard throughout the country on NBC's Blue Network.
Well, that was great, Jean Hamilton. Jean, you play with such a sturdy touch that you might almost forgive the audience for thinking you were a man.
Well, I get that all the time. But as you can see, I'm all girl.
Not even a yard wide.
No. I'm a rancher's daughter from the plains of Montana.
They picked 10 people, and I always said, well, they didn't have a piano player, so when I came along, they said, okay, you can go. But it was a lot of fun.
And for your information, since you can't see her, Jean takes off her shoes and beats out the rhythm with her stocking feet and really enjoys herself. Jean, you're on.
The stars of the film, called On Stage Everybody, included Julie London and Jack Oakey. Universal Pictures sent several of the stars, including Jean, on a publicity tour, performing live in the theaters where the picture was shown. In St. Paul, she met Jean Wrobel, an RKO theater manager. They were married in January 1946. Jean returned briefly to playing club dates, but the couple soon moved back to Montana. But Jean didn't quit performing. She was a fixture for years at Missoula's Red Line Supper Club, traveling the 100-mile round trip from her home in Hamilton 4 days a week for 35 years.
Well, I'll tell you, I've done what I wanted to do, and I enjoyed all of it. I wish a lot of times that I'd stuck it out a little longer.
Jean Wrobel's career has been long enough to inspire a whole generation of young musicians who say she's a generous, attentive fan. She tells them to find their own voice in the music, something she says she learned from Teddy Wilson.
But I know if somebody had said, "What's your greatest wish?" It would have been to play just like him. But that isn't what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to play your own thing. That's what music is. That's what makes jazz what it is. And I've finally gotten that in my head.
Jean Wrobel is still an active performer. You're likely to find her playing at a local tavern in the Bitterroot or at one of the many private parties that she graces each year. Among the mementos from her career are these. They're some of the checks she wrote to Teddy Wilson for her piano lessons. He cashed this one at Cafe Society. Well, that's our show. We'd like to thank the staff at the Isaac Walton Inn for their hospitality. The inn is open year-round for hiking, fishing, rafting, and berry picking in the summer, and cross-country skiing in the winter. If you enjoyed this episode of Backroads, you might want to visit your city-county library to check out the previous programs from our series. They're available to take home and watch with your family, friends, or out-of-state visitors. And if you know of a special place or person that we should feature on our program, send us a letter. The address is Backroads of Montana, University of Montana, Missoula, Montana, 59812. But don't ask us to tell you where that railroad trestle is. Thank you for watching the Backroads of Montana. Until next time, I'm William Marcus.
Home is where Montana is my home. From mountain peaks to prairie lands, the places I have known. And I'm bound to ramble, yes, I'm bound to roam. And when I'm in off the road now, boys, Montana is my home. Coming in off the road now, boys, you know I'm heading home.
This program was made possible by production support from the Greater Montana Foundation and the University of Montana.